Hi, I'm Stephanie Green, and I work with the History Task Force as a volunteer, but also um, I'm one of the lead researchers for the Family Bridges Project. And our main goal was to find plantations in the Texas area and build out a multi-generational tree for the enslaved individuals. And so I'm going to show you kind of my process and how I found information. So the goal, was to bring together enslaved African Americans and their families, identify them and connect them to the slave owners, and then trying to build out at least 4+ generations, bringing it to the present. And sometimes that can be tied back to cemeteries. And then also connecting and attaching validating sources for people in the future who will be coming across and need more information. The challenge is that enslaved individuals were considered property. So prior to 1870, they did not show up on census records and did not necessarily have a name. Also, the marriages between enslaved individuals were not recognized by law, so it was very hard to identify. And some did not know their date of birth or their place of birth or even their actual name. And there was also, they adopted different surnames that were kind of unpredictable and or changed over time. So discovery is a process, not an event. Somewhere and start somewhere, and little by little, ideas and inspirations will come. So you want to start with what you know, an ancestor's name, maybe a plantation owner, your state, and the county of interest. And then where do you start your research? You choose that area, you look at the 1870 census, and then also look at the 1850 and 60 slave schedule to see who the slave owners were in that area. You can find the information in county records, state and historical associations, local libraries in their genealogy department, and then family search and ancestry. And I have some other resources at the end to tell you about. So you look and become familiar with your area of interest. I usually start partially with the 1870 census and look at the different precincts and who's living there, the families. I will take this from Ancestry and create a spreadsheet that will help me to analyze and organize better. So as you can see, these are the dwelling numbers, if they're African American or white, and I attach their PID once I find them or I build them. And one thing to note is that oftentimes there's more than one family living in a household, or you have farm laborers that appear in the dwellings and living together. So it's important to connect them together. And also some of these individuals might have been living in one precinct, but the rest of their families living in another. And so that helps you kind of connect the dots and build those generations. I went and started with Henry Jones as the slave owner of interest. I checked the 1850 and 60 records for the white heads of household, and I noted and paid attention if there was any Black servants in the household or in the neighboring area. And then I would compare that to 1850 and 60 slave schedule to see the number, listing the number of his enslaved inhabitants for a particular period of time. And then I would make a note on the spreadsheet, any notes, or on his person's page. His information I found at the Fort Bend Library. There was a book that I found that gave me a lot of information. So this is the 1850 60 slave schedule for Henry Jones. As you can see, in 1850 he had 9 slaves, and in 1860 he had 47 slaves. And sometimes he appeared in more than one location because he had multiple properties. So sometimes you might see more than one entry for slave owners. This is his person's page. On the left is kind of his pedigree chart of his wife and all of his children, and his vital page. He was born in Virginia, and he migrated from Virginia to Fort Bend County and brought slaves with him. And so that's also important and helpful in your research. And then also the events, there's the tax assessments, the 1850 and 1860 census records are helpful, and you want those all attached as a source. And then lastly is the other relationships, well, which I'll talk about in depth a little bit further in the importance of that. But you can see all of the named slaves attached as enslavement to him as the owner. This is his probate record from his estate inventory in 1861. I was able to find this through full text search transcription, as you can see, and it is naming them individually and their value and their age. So this gives me a list of these are his enslaved individuals. And that's where I was able to start building the trees from this inventory. I wanted to know all the other Jones family members that were related to him, brothers, uncle, father, and this gave me a picture of who inherited possibly what property in his will, and just kind of give me a general idea of his family structure. So the library, like I said, is very helpful with property records and wills and deeds. This is the thesis paper that I found and gave me a lot of information on Henry Jones, and then also other slave owners that came, like the Rome family, and settled in the Fort Bend area as part of the Austin 300. The property and probate records are very valuable, mostly because it gives you the information of the direct heirs and also business associations or others whom the property is granted. Wiley Martin, he went and on his will gave some of his slaves to the children of Henry Jones because they were his godchildren. And so you're looking at these transactions through the wills, and you can often find named slaves in wills as well. So once you start with a name, you find a name. So this is R.C. She was a female from North Carolina in 1791. She came with Henry Jones to when he developed the Austin, colony period. And she worked in Henry Jones's Prairie House. He also had a plantation house as well. She had 3 daughters, Jane, Cecilia, and Caroline, and possibly a son, Jack, but I have not confirmed that 100%, so I haven't included him on the tree. And here in the 1850 slave schedule, there is a 53-year-old female who's Black. And then I see in his will of 1861, there's an RC, and she's 70 years old, and she's $100 value. So I've concluded that the 53-year-old on the 1850 census was RC on the 1861 will, and I'm going to build her tree. These are her descendants, 4 generations plus, because I found her children and their children. So it's the building of that. This is her daughter, Cecilia, and I want to talk about the other relationships and why it's important. Oftentimes, you will see people living in households, aunts, uncles, grandchildren, or white servants, white individuals having a servant or a farm laborer that's counted on the census records. This really gives you information about the migration of the families and their friends, neighbors, who's living with whom or close by because families stuck together and they migrated together. So here you see in the other relationship for Cecilia, I have Henry Jones as as the slave owner. I also have Henry Riggins. She's living in his household as an occupant, and Mary as well. And so on the census records, you can see that all these people are living in a household, and it connects them together to help find, they point to each other when you're searching. And then in collaboration and memories, notes are great because it allows you the tool to add notes and share questions or insights, warnings, maybe your research notes if you have a question about something. As you can see for Cecilia, I put that through the research, it was possible that Cecilia worked at the Prairie Home with her mother, R.C., but lived at the River Plantation with her husband, Firma, and their children, and she would go back and forth. So it just gives a nice picture of her life. And then in the memories, you can secure photos, letters, wills, military records. So I've attached Henry Jones's will in her memories and tagged her and every other named individual in that will. So that document is in each one of their person's page, and they're all tied together. So lastly is alternative names. This is really important because in census records, census workers heard names differently. They might have had a nickname. There was a misspelling. It gives you and allows a more in-depth way of searching when you go to a person's page. So when you look at Celia, it's Celie Edwards, Celia, or Cecilia Edwards. And I've put where that appears, like the 1880 census, the 1870 census, and then the person can also go in and directly to that. This is Firma, her husband, and he appears 4 different ways. So Finney Edwards, Frenny Edwards, or Finney with a PH. He was from Africa. He was one of the 5 African enslaved individuals on the Henry Jones property, and he married Cecilia. So all of these, all of this can be done in any type of order, this research. It's just building and connecting the dots together, and that's what's been very nice with the Family Bridges project, because we are finding enslaved individuals that are not named, but tying them all together through family search. And then lastly, the resources. This is just a list of what I use. The local historical society, genealogy, libraries, wiki, Freedmen Bureau, Texas State Historical Association, and then there's databases about enslaved individuals as well that you can find. Is there any questions? Because we have a few minutes. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. Hi, James.
Good. Hey, just fascinating on the record. Um, you mentioned somewhere in there, or these, did you start, was he one of the Austin 300, or is that just
No, he
a mention?
was.
Okay.
Yeah, no, he was one of the 300, and he had gotten his property here in the Fort Bend area from Stephen F. Austin, and that's he started with his prairie home
Hmm.
and raised cattle and stock, and then when things changed, he had his plantation home, which was down more around the Brazos River because that was a major connecting for bringing in slaves and goods, and then the railroad started and everything. So, yeah.
That's always fascinating.
Yeah, a
Mhm.
lot of them started in Fort Bend County, the plantation owners and stuff, and then they moved inward to Montgomery County and stuff. Brazoria and Fort Bend were one of the large hotspots because of the river
Uh-huh.
for the settlements.
Right, right. Oh, that's fascinating. Really appreciate it.
Sure.
Live. Hey, this is Mary Linda from the library in Dallas. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I have a dissertation about a plantation on which one of my ancestors was an overseer, and it's got names of the slaves in it. Was that ancestry that you were showing the examples on? And what would be the best way for me to connect to put that information quote out there so that descendants of these slaves might be able to find that information?
Right. I use Family Search and Ancestry is most, I build in Family Search, but I can build in, Ancestry as well. I mean, this started kind of as a Family Search project and it's grown from there. So, I would be willing to kind of help you a little bit more and kind of explain my process faster than just 15 minutes. Because it is pretty easy to do. It's just a matter of finding a person and getting that starting point, or finding all the individuals that were, on the plantation, and then start looking like I showed in the 1870 census and stuff. But on the slide in the beginning is my email, and reach out to me, and I mean, we can Zoom, and I would love to see what you have and kind of point you in the right direction, get you going, and go from there.
Yeah, that'd be great. I hate to think that it's just sitting in my desk and not benefiting somebody, that might be
Yeah.
looking for these people. Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Thanks.
I'd love to help you. I'm sorry, your name again?
Mary Linda McCann.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, just go ahead and get, when you download the slide, my email's on the front.
Good deal. Thanks.
Great. Thank you.